science teacher, 6 grades. Now right here in front of you is a checklist for 5 grades. I'm going to talk about those first because they all go together in one document. That's where I'm going to find the evidence you've learned what you need to learn. And then I'm going to talk about the 6th grade, big grade. And of course, as we're working on these for the 4 days of class time, you will earn 4 10% grades for your daily record of what you're working on that day. So this is one of the things you could be working on is your evaluation. At the top of this, it says peer testimony, CER, evaluation, 500-point assignment or 5 big grades. And I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom, talk about the grades because that gets attention. 100 points for read/blued the objectives if there's evidence you applied them, or 50 points if learning objectives are blue without evidence they were applied. So right here at the top, these are all red because you haven't read them yet. What am I learning? I am learning how to, and I'm going to turn that blue. Okay, I've read that question. I'm learning how to exhibit the ability to communicate valid scientific conclusions supported by observational data. I am also learning how to evaluate, critique, and examine all sides of scientific evidence and explanations. Okay, so this second one I'm going to focus on first. This is going to be your 5 grades. I'm going to turn that blue because that's the one I'm doing right now, evaluating. And so I'm going to go back down here to the bottom. Am I finished with that? 100 points if I read all the objectives. If there's evidence, I applied them. How can I get evidence to show I did that? Well, how am I communicating it? How am I going to communicate my evidence? Well, there's going to be asking of questions in order to actively listen and summarizing of evidence. I'm going to have to do both those things. What is my success criteria? Am I sharing my sketch or other CER? No, not if I'm evaluating. Am I reading my CER clearly? No, I'm evaluating someone else's. I'm giving them critique. Am I actively listening? Yes. To someone else's claim, evidence, and reasoning? Am I recording my feedback and feed forward in the form below in order to encourage critical thinking from my classmate? Yep, that's what I'm doing. And so I'm going to look for these in the form, the opportunities to record, document, communicate what I'm learning. All right, so that's this first one. So I've made it blue, but I need evidence that I applied what I just read. And so that will be 100 points for documenting witness, full name, and the nutshell location, 70 points for name only. So that's where I'm going to say, when I'm evaluating someone, I'm going to ask them, I can do it like in a courtroom. I can say, would you please state your name for the court, right? Or for the jury, Max Smith, we'll just say. And then I'm going to say, please describe the location of the crime scene. And for our purposes, it's going to be a nutshell. So everybody's going to have a nutshell. And then which one is it? In this case, it is they're sharing with us the red bedroom. And so there, I just made 100 points for this one right here. 100 points for documenting witness, full name, and nutshell location. Okay, next is the orange 100 points for active listener notes, 10 points for claim, 70 points for evidence, and 20 points for reasoning connection. So that's right here, active listener's notes. In one word, and this is the guiding questions for the listener's notes. In one word or 2 words, what is their claim? So this one, they're going to share something. Let's say it's in the red bedroom, nutshell, the most likely thing that happened was that Jim Green murdered Marie Jones and made it look like a suicide. Okay, so I'm gonna put, well, one word, I would say murder or homicide. And then if I was gonna use 2 words, I would say made to look like suicide. All right, and then notes on their evidence. They're going to read this. They're going to show this and read it, and they're going to show us also the evidence as they go through their evidence. So based on room, maybe they say something like this. Based on room and evidence measurements, which is how we collected the evidence, The suitcase was a foot away from the body. Candy was 3 feet away from the whiskey bottles. And a jackknife was inches away from Marie Jones's hand. And I'll show you a picture. This is the red bedroom, and here's the closet area that goes into that room. And this is the woman's body, and this is where the knife was found. There's the cut. And here's a glass of whiskey. Still has whiskey in it. Open drawers. Here's a rag that is soaked with blood. So if I go back here to evidence, how many items of evidence as I'm listening to that student's CER and seeing the pictures, how many items can I list? Let's see. I'm going to try to list these 7 items. And I want to do that because for the 6th grade, this person, Max Smith, is going to get a grade for how well they communicated their evidence and their reasoning to this person. So, notes on their evidence. I'm going to list those 7 items there and how were they analyzed. I can put it in notes version. This one is pretty short, so it's not too difficult. The jackknife was inches away from her hand, so I might say for that item, knife inches from victim's hand. Right, that would be an example with that in those notes. But I need 7 items there because that's 70 points. So far they've got 10 plus 10, they've got 20 points. And then the most crucial point of connection in their reasoning is more likely that Marie Jones died by her boyfriend killing her than by suicide. By the observation that she left her drink halfway empty on the ground, we know that drinking was not her first priority of the night. Rather, she was gathering clothes to leave. Okay, that might refer to the suitcase, but kind of missing some reasoning with regard to that analysis and then reasoning, which is why her drawers were open as well. So it did connect the drawers to that scenario, to that scene. Her boyfriend / pimp, Jim Green, was not in favor of this, so he killed her when she went into her closet to get her suitcase. Okay, there's the connection with the suitcase. To make it look like suicide, he left the jackknife behind. Okay, and I would want to be more specific there, behind, like really close to her hand. And then he cleaned off blood with a rag and left it behind in the room. So that's that other connection, right? If she committed suicide, why would she wipe some blood off onto a rag? I get that. So I'm adding my own reasoning in there with that. And finally, there's another bit about candy. Is there candy listed in the evidence? Yep, there is. Okay. And it was near the whiskey bottles. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say most crucial point. I think it was the knife, wasn't it? So I would say the knife and the rag probably. So I would type an answer about that. I'm not going to make this video longer at this point. So then, after they've presented their CER, their scientific conclusion about their crime scene, what happened, they're going to share maybe photos or crime scene sketches of their scene, and they're going to share their CER. When I've finished the orange, my job as an evaluator is to give feedback to reinforce their strengths. So first of all, did they organize their conclusion into the CER framework? Yes. Okay, I'll just bold that. I understand very well and so I would type that out. I would understand very well your, and then we're going to pick one of these to talk about for that student. I understand very well your reasoning because it connects the evidence with reasons for a homicide cover up. All right. And then on my green part, so this is another grade. So far we've got 100 points again now for the feedback responses, 50 or 100. So I've completed both of those. And then 100 points for completing a feed forward is next. So feed forward is, somebody might think, oh, that's kind of negative. No, it's neither negative or positive. It's what could we do to go forward? So we can tell them the blank part is confusing because, so I might say the E2, and we need to say what E2 is. That's the analysis part of evidence. So E1 would be how's the evidence gathered? That is clear, but evidence analysis, the evidence analysis for suitcase was made. I'm not sure what that means. For the suitcase, it is confusing because it's either unclear or incomplete. Okay, and then explain a little more about why you chose. Max, if you could explain a little more about why you chose this reasoning. Other reasons for choosing this reasoning are, or I might say that this reasoning could also be put in a different way by, and I could type up what they say on that. All right, and that is the 5th grade. So how do you get the 6th grade? Well, you need to exhibit the ability to communicate your own CER. You need to share your sketch and or CER and photos using technology, just like I'm doing right now. Read your CER clearly and be understood. So that's how you can get that 6th grade. And I might just really quickly, since we're on that 6th grade, here's another example, and I'm just going to read through this real quick, as if I'm presenting it to you as courtroom testimony. You've asked me, please state your name for the court, and I will say, my name is Max Whaley, and please, what is your expertise? I'm a crime scene investigator. And which crime did you investigate? I investigated the kitchen nutshell. Okay, thank you. Please give us some background. Well, after a couple had a disagreement, Fred Barnes, the husband, left the house, not returning for lunch. Concerned, Mrs. Barnes decided to cook all of Mr. Barnes's favorites. When Mr. Barnes returned, he said the doors were locked, and so he tried the window, which was also locked, but when he looked inside, he saw Mrs. Barnes unconscious on the floor. He then proceeded to call the police. Now, this is not evidence per se, but this is what we had to go on. These were our leads. In the end, after our investigation, I concluded that in the kitchen nutshell, the most likely thing that happened was Mr. Barnes murdered Mrs. Barnes and made it look like an accident. Now, how do I know this? Well, based on room and evidence measurements, the body doesn't seem to have been moved or out of place. There's also an ice tray next to her. The sink had potato peels in it and was being used. Was she preparing dinner? Looked like she was busy anyway at the moment when she died. Based on observations of the crime scene photos, the sink probably indicates Mrs. Barnes was busy cooking dinner. The fridge was opened and there was an ice cube tray next to the victim, meaning she was most likely caught by surprise. So she had got her ice cube tray out, intending to maybe put it back in the freezer after she was finished with it, but rather than doing that, she suddenly died for some reason. The table near the window had the tablecloth out of place compared to the rest of the very tidy kitchen. And the body showed no signs of foul play except for the unusual reddish color on her face. There were no wounds. It was just a reddish color that was unusual. The oven was opened with a pie that was ready, but the gas jets were still on. The rolling pin on the butcher block seemed out of place and could have possibly been used as a weapon against the victim. The doors were stuffed with newspaper with a probable cause of limiting the oxygen in the room. So, here's the reasoning that supports the claim, my conclusion that in the kitchen nutshell, the most likely thing that happened was Mrs. Barnes was murdered, or Mr. Barnes murdered Mrs. Barnes, but made it look like an accident. Since the victim was heavily focused on preparing a good meal, it would be easy for anyone to surprise her. It seems someone did surprise her and easily could have used the heavy rolling pin to strike her unconscious. My evidence for that in research was the jarring can cause someone to be unconscious, and hurriedly could have placed that rolling pin back, which explains the odd position that the rolling pin was in. The ice cube tray right next to the victim, and an open fridge probably means that she was in the middle of refilling the ice tray before being caught by surprise, causing her to collapse. But instead of finishing the job, someone decided to stuff both the doors in the room with newspapers, causing a lack of proper airflow. And this can lead to asphyxia, or it is when there's not enough oxygen for the body's cells. And this can lead to the reddish color on the face. And since the oven had the gas jets on, it is probable to have caused the victim's asphyxiation. The reddish color on the victim's face is another sign of that was probably the cause. If the doors were unusable after blocking them with newspaper, the only other way out of the room would be the window by the table. Another thing that was in an unusual position compared to the rest of the room was the tablecloth. That could have been from the suspect, or Mr. Barnes, fleeing the crime scene. And Mrs. Barnes was then found dead after Mr. Barnes called the police. So he was the one that found the body, and it also makes sense that if someone else had entered and tried to accomplish this homicide, then why would they have the key to lock the premises as they went out, and would come back and claim that it was why it was locked? So it seems to me that is the most reasonable conclusion, is that Mr. Barnes murdered Mrs. Barnes and made it look like an accident. So there you have it. So if I were Mr. Whaley, I would record what I did today. So I would say I shared my courtroom testimony. Is that enough? Nope, not enough. By sharing photos and my CER and explaining my investigation. That is specific enough that Mr. Whaley could give me 100% if that was my work that day. You can see I've given students who are making it clear like that, they get an orange cell here, and that means they get 100 on their daily 10% work grade. And this one, and there's another one, I will finish editing my 3 nutshell CERs and turned them all in, and then practice presenting. So in this case, they presented 2 people there and their family. So I will practice sharing my CER by reading it aloud 3 times, so that when it is time for me to present my evidence and claim statement, it is clear. So that's a good example of one. It's testable and falsifiable. Now that's the 5 grades plus the courtroom testimony grade. Not only grades, but something you can carry forward into your future, whether you're speaking to a jury in court, or whether you're just listening to someone and learning. Thank you for paying attention. Stay safe and make it whale money.